To committed Christians who were Arabists, pre-positioned to enter the war on terror from the very beginning. Who knew but God?
This week on Christian World News, in the dark and dangerous world of undercover agents, a husband and wife depend on God to fight ISIS and Al-Qaeda.
Plus, stronger than ever, that's how Benjamin Netanyahu describes Israel's relationship with America. But he's still warning of a looming threat on the horizon.
And this congressman has gathered thousands of prayers for the President of the United States. So why is the media putting a negative spin on such a positive practice?
여러분 안녕하십니까? 크리스천 월드뉴스입니다. 과거 미국 중앙정보국 요원으로 활동하다 급진 순위파 무장단체 IS에 침입해 탈출 임무를 지휘했던 한 여자가 있습니다. 최근 자신의 저서 브레이킹 커버를 통해 그 이야기를 담아냈는데요. 미셸 릭비 아사드를 함께 만나보겠습니다. 오늘의 첫 소식입니다.
How do you stop terrorist organizations like ISIS from committing violent attacks in cities like New York City, Times Square? You have to go undercover, infiltrate them, learn how they think and act. And that's what Michelle Rigby Assad did for the CIA.
I spent 10 years as an undercover counterterrorism officer in the CIA. And because my expertise is in the Arab world, the majority of my career was spent in the Middle East region.
That meant Assad and her team, often including her husband, a fellow agent named Joseph, worked against the likes of Al-Qaeda and ISIS.
What's it like to work with these guys side by side? I mean...
Well, it is fascinating. The best schooling in terrorism a person can get is being in front of those guys like that, which going to Iraq for our tour, we're allowed to say that that I and my husband served in Baghdad for a year. We got to interact with those sources and really get to know what they were thinking and where they're coming from. And
what made them tick?
What made them tick? Right, exactly. And which is fascinating because if they'd met you on the street, they'd prefer to cut your head off instead of actually deal with you. But for whatever reason, they've decided, I'm going to work with the CIA to take out other members of my group.
That's all Assad says she can say, but she does add a major hurdle she had to overcome, interrogating these terrorists and being a woman.
For them, I was the opposite of what they were expecting to meet with. And I had to really work at establishing a relationship with them where they would see me as intelligent and knowledgeable of the Arab world. You know, because in their minds, I should be at home managing the family, and I can't even leave the home without a male minder or without being completely covered in black. So I was a complete anomaly to these guys.
Assad's book, Breaking Cover, My Secret Life in the CIA and What It Taught Me About What's Worth Fighting For, covers how becoming a CIA agent was the last thing on her mind. She didn't even know her eventual role even existed. Then when 9/11 happened, she and her husband knew God had them on the right path.
Here were two committed Christians who were Arabists, pre-positioned to enter the war on terror from the very beginning. Who knew but God?
In her book, Assad wanted to give a realistic view of a CIA undercover counterterrorism officer. She not only describes analyzing sources who were driven by radical, hateful ideology, but also how she surrendered her life to God.
Ordinary people can do extraordinary things when their faith is greater than their fear and intimidation. And it's really to give people the encouragement to do the hard things in life.
The book's final chapters describes life after the CIA, specifically a rescue mission leading a group of persecuted Christians out of Iraq before ISIS terrorists moved into their village.
Miraculously, even though the evacuation almost fell apart on numerous occasions, on December 10th, 2015, we successfully airlifted 149 Iraqi Christians out of northern Iraq to their new homes in Slovakia.
What does Assad hope people take away from her book? A greater understanding of her belief and faith in Jesus Christ, but also how people should never give up, reaching for their goals. Eric Rosales, CBN News, New York City.
얼마 전 세계 여성의 날을 보냈는데요. 전 세계 역사에 수많은 여성들이 남긴 업적을 기억하는 날이기도 했죠. 하지만 오픈도어 선교회는 무엇보다 기독교 신앙을 이유로 박해당하고 있는 여성들을 기억해달라고 당부했습니다.
What is it like to be a woman in a country that views them as second-class citizens, especially in the Muslim world?
One of the things that we found out in our last reporting period was not only are Christians particularly highlighted and persecuted in countries where Muslim extremism or Hindu extremism is at an all-time high, but Christian women are doubly persecuted. They're seen as less than male people within that culture, and they are also persecuted because of their faith. So it's really difficult. One example of that is how many Christian women, thousands of Christian women, we can report almost 3,000, but we know the number is actually much higher than that, have been forced into marriage in the last year in Muslim extremist territories, or raped, or in some way sexually harassed, because they were Christian women, not just because they were women, but because they were Christian women. So they're doubly persecuted in these countries. One example, a woman who's a Christian in Boko Haram was attacked, kidnapped by an Islamic extremist, forced into marriage. When the father went to pursue the daughter, the tribal leader said, under Sharia law, you have no rights. She's gone. So that happens every day around the world, surprisingly, and we need to lift up our voice and be heard supporting Christian women around the world.
And what's causing this widespread persecution?
Well, there's a number of factors, the growth of Islamic extremism, but in India, in Nepal, there's a growth of Hindu extremism, people saying you're not really a Hindu, you're not really an Indian unless you're Hindu, and they use women as the target. They do forced marriages in some circumstances. They use sexual harassment and rape as a threat. It's really a difficult situation for them. And as long as extremism is allowed to prosper, it's going to continue to be a problem. And of course, the other societal factors are still in place as well.
And what is Open Doors doing to help these Christian women escape or recover?
We're creating programs. We're highlighting it. Of course, we want everybody to be an advocate for Christian women, but we're creating programs to help empower them, help them to get the literacy that they need. We don't want Christian women to be second-class citizens anywhere. They are children of the King. We want them to be able to read, write, hold down a job. So we're giving them the power to start small businesses, do these kinds of things in places where no one else is going to believe in them. We as believers and followers of Jesus want to step behind them and give them the support they need.
And what is Open Doors doing to help those victims who might not be Christians? How do you lead them to Christ, and how do you even lead their oppressors to Christ?
The best thing we can do in these countries like the Middle East and other places where being a Christian is considered weird, odd, or illegal is to show the loving kindness of Jesus in very practical ways. So empower the church, empower the body of Christ to be the body of Christ, and not doing it in the sense that we're trying to colonialize anything, but just be the love of Jesus. And that is very winsome everywhere. Everywhere Jesus is exampled and talked about, he does very well. We need to encourage people to just keep it simple, the simple faith, and it starts with being a good example.
Beautiful. David Curry, CEO of Open Doors USA, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
최근 베냐민 네타냐후 이스라엘 총리가 도널드 트럼프 미 대통령을 내방하고 대화를 나눴습니다. 트럼프 대통령에 대한 극찬을 아끼지 않은 가운데 이스라엘이 안고 있는 잠재적 위협과 이란의 위험성에 대해서도 경고했는데요. 함께 만나보시죠.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is pretty happy with President Trump and wasted no time telling the pro-Israel crowd at the AIPAC Policy Conference.
It's especially great to be in America's capital now that he has recognized Jerusalem as Israel's capital.
Fresh off of Monday's Oval Office meeting, Netanyahu made it very clear that his relationship with this White House was stronger than ever.
We appreciate the efforts of President Trump's superb team. Thank you all for your hard work for peace.
When it comes to the state of Israel, Netanyahu got right to it, breaking down what he calls the good, bad, and beautiful facing the country. The good? Israeli technology and defense, like their famous Iron Dome, which he says is due in part to U.S. support.
Thank you, Congress, Republicans and Democrats alike.
He also called out those who don't back Israel, specifically supporters of the boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement known as BDS.
Pretty soon, the countries that don't have relations with us, they're going to be isolated.
But what about the bad? Netanyahu pointed straight to one place.
We must stop Iran. We will stop Iran.
He condemned President Obama's 2015 Iran nuclear agreement and said Iran, along with surrounding nations, are looking for ways to attack.
Last week we read in the book of Esther about an earlier Persian attempt to exterminate our people. They failed then, they'll fail now.
Netanyahu's list didn't include his mounting legal troubles. On Monday, a former top aide agreed to turn state's evidence against the prime minister in a potential bribery charge. Instead, Netanyahu focused on what he calls the beautiful, U.S.-Israel relations, especially when it comes to pro-Israel legislation.
Israel hopes that the passage of the Taylor Force Act will make clear to President Abbas that America has zero tolerance for terror.
That call for congressional support was clear at AIPAC, with congressmen from both sides of the aisle vowing to back the Jewish state.
The security of the United States is strong when our bond with Israel is strong.
But while there may be bipartisan support on Capitol Hill, Senator Marco Rubio says it's a different story in the classroom.
I'm deeply concerned about what's happening in many American college campuses and the sort of embedded anti-Semitism that we see.
Now, over the last couple of days, about 3,600 students have made their way through AIPAC. And that's exactly what organizers say they want to see, a future built on a solid foundation of U.S.-Israel relations. Amber Strong, CBN News, Washington.
트럼프 행정부는 오는 5월 이스라엘 건국 70주년을 기념하며 미국 텔아비브에 있는 미국 대사관을 예루살렘으로 이전하겠다는 계획을 발표했는데요. 특히 이를 위해 지난 20년간 끊임없이 노력을 해왔던 예루살렘 국제기독교대사관 데이비드 파슨스는 그 누구보다도 이 소식을 반겼습니다. 함께 만나보시죠.
Not many Americans know that there was actually a law that was passed in 1995. You were responsible for the first draft. Tell us about it.
The Gingrich Congress had just come in early 1995, and it was the first time the Republicans had control of the House of Representatives in about 40 years. It was in the midst of the Oslo process. We felt Christians in particular should speak up to guard Jerusalem from the Palestinian Authority. The PLO wanted to have a say there. We felt much more comfortable with the way Israel has kept Jerusalem as a house of prayer for all peoples. They've got a good track record on it. So I did a draft of a bill to move our embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. The bill got changed by the time it got through Congress. The presidential waiver added, delay after delay for 23 years now. But President Trump is doing in the order that we originally set out in our initial draft.
Why did you feel it was necessary to move the embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem?
Well, it's symbolic, recognizing the 3,000, even 4,000-year-old Jewish claim and connection to Jerusalem. But there's also substance to it in that the Palestinians have denied any Jewish connection to Jerusalem or the Temple Mount, and we wanted to affirm that. And the wisdom of that bill was shown just a few months later. It passed finally in October of '95. In December of that year, Arafat took over Bethlehem for the first time, and when if you were visiting Manger Square that Christmas season, you were not told about the connection between the birth of Jesus in this site. You were handed official PA paper documents that said that the Western Wall in Jerusalem was an exclusively Muslim site. So, tampering with history and such, we need to stand for truth that God attached the Jews to Jerusalem, even to this day, for a redemptive purpose.
Trump is finally doing it. Why? What do you think influenced the decision for him?
Well, other presidents have promised to do it, and once they get in the White House, they get all these briefings that the Arabs are going to be very upset. The whole region will explode. And he's the first one who tested these threats of mayhem and violence. and there were some protests, but it did not turn out as bad as many thought. And I think it just shows maybe they were just trying to intimidate us all along. And I think even now the Palestinian Authority and Hamas are desperate to try and stir the Arab street against these embassies coming back. But there's just not enough momentum, and the whole region is in political chaos still.
Now, a recent story in the Washington Post reports that Christians are playing a big role in helping Jews around the world return to Israel. And your group, the ICEJ, is mentioned. Tell us, what do you do to help Jews make Aliyah?
We've been assisting Jews return to Israel from all around the world since we were founded in 1980. We already had people, even in the 70s, helping Jews who could come out through Vienna, through Hungary and Austria. That was the only way out before the fall of communism. But once Soviet communism fell, we've helped over 140,000 Jews make Aliyah to Israel. Wow. We helped around 3,000 last year, and there are other Christian ministries do this, but we do it because we believe it's the hand of God that hero nations, he who scattered Israel, will gather them. And there's an invitation in Isaiah. God says, I'll beckon to the Gentiles. They will carry you home on their shoulders and in their arms. We're invited to play a role in this positive side of Bible prophecy, the restoration of Israel.
So that's why it's so important to Christians to see the Jews come back to their homeland.
And it's exciting. I've been at the airport welcoming B'nai Menashe from Northeast India, Ethiopian Jews, Ukrainian Jews escaping the civil war there, Russian Jews, of course, even French Jews, flights that we sponsored, and it never gets old. There's such an excitement starting over, your life over in the land that belonged to your ancestors many generations ago. It's a real faith step because Israel has, 150, 200,000 rockets pointed at it, and I think everyone who moves there, whether they're secular or religious, God honors that step of faith, and he says, I'm going to plant him in the land with all my heart and all my soul.
도널드 트럼프 미 대통령은 당선 이후 CBN과의 인터뷰를 통해 지금 이 시대에는 그 어느 때보다 하나님의 도우심이 필요하다고 강조한 바 있는데요. 한 의원은 지역 주민들에게 대통령을 위한 기도문을 써서 보내기도 했죠. 하지만 언론이 보는 시선은 다소 부정적이었습니다. 오늘의 마지막 소식입니다.
Congressman Mike Boss didn't like what he was seeing in our country in the beginning of 2017. Protests were happening more often, and many well-known people made it clear they did not support the new administration. So his wife had an idea. They should collect thoughts and prayers to send to the new president.
We thought maybe we'd get 30, whatever. It came back, there were hundreds.
People from age 5 to almost 100 wrote the president. The boss read through all of them to make sure only uplifting messages made it through.
There was a 90-year-old woman who on it said, I've never written to a president, but I'm depending on you, and I'm praying for you every day that that you'll straighten this country out, and it needs it so bad.
Boss had the letters delivered to the White House and had no idea if they'd be read or not. Then, a few months later, he found himself in the Oval Office with the president.
He all of a sudden turned at me and he goes, Boss, prayer cards. And I went, wow. I said, yeah, we sent you some prayer cards over.
A White House aide then pulled the bag of prayer cards off a shelf and brought them over.
He said, we use these every day. And I said, what? He said, yeah. He said, that's why they're here. He said, we use them every day.
And it wasn't just the president who read them.
I turned, and honest to goodness, I turned and hit chest to chest with the vice president. And he goes, Mike, he's not joking. We read these every day, and they're so wonderful.
Almost a year after that meeting, Boss received a picture of him with the president holding the prayer cards. His office decided to post the photo on social media. It went up 3 days after the Florida school shooting that killed 17 children, and the timing caused a great deal of internet backlash.
There was an atheist group that got on social media that said, here we have this shooting at this school, and all you're going to do is thoughts and prayers, and it got real negative from then.
Many people assume the picture was taken that same day.
It's upsetting that in today's media, they would take give a false impression of what it was, and then badmouth what we did. Is there other action you can take besides prayer? You bet. But you can't not pray if you're a person of faith. You have to.
Boss tells CBN News he knows firsthand the impact thoughts and prayers can have on lawmakers.
Scripture is pretty clear that we need to pray for our leaders.
And it's something he's put into practice his whole life, no matter what side of the aisle the president was on.
I served with Barack Obama in the state of Illinois. Know him well. Don't agree with him. Didn't agree with him on quite a few things. But I never did not pray for him.
Despite the negative press, Boss tells me they already have a fresh bag of thoughts and prayers ready to go, and his wife hopes to soon collect submissions from around the country. Reporting from Capitol Hill, Abigail Robertson, CBN News.
크리스천 월드뉴스 오늘 준비한 소식은 여기까지입니다. 저는 다음 주에 인사드리겠습니다. 시청해주신 여러분 고맙습니다.